Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another FPL video. So in this one we're going to be breaking down my team selection for game week 2, and I've also got at the end of the video 6 players that I've got on my watch list that are potential long-term or short-term transfer options that I am considering moving forward. So let's look at the team first of all. So overall we scored 66 points in game week 1. I did do a breakdown video of this and essentially had some kind of thoughts about the game week overall, so please check that video out if you haven't already and you'd like some kind of essentially some tips or some feedback on how certain games went. But yeah, in terms of moving into game week 2, my squad really, I'm very happy with what it looks like. Again, there was some mixed review on kind of some of the performances of the players, but overall 66 points. Like I mentioned in the breakdown video, I'm very happy with that. And if you would have offered that to me before the game week kicked off, I definitely would have taken that. So more than happy to go into game week 2 without having to make any transfers. I will caveat it with the fact that Mason Mount, I would say in this starting 11, is probably the weakest selection so far for me. I think I was a little bit disappointed with him in the Everton fixture. He only managed 64 minutes before Tuchel brought him off, and I don't think really he looked himself. I mean, I do anticipate that at Stamford Bridge against Tottenham that maybe are going to leave essentially a bit more space in behind for Mount to attack and potentially put Sterling through and or even Havertz if he has a better game. So I still think that there's potential upside for owning him, but definitely he is the player that I'm considering moving on from game week 3 onwards if he doesn't necessarily perform against Tottenham. So we'll see how he goes. But as for everybody else, I'm really happy with how they perform generally. A little bit disappointed with, of course, Trent and Robbo conceding 2 goals and also not providing any attacking returns for us. Of course, the irony being that the Robertson versus Diaz conversation, it actually equaled Darwin, so there was nobody that could have seen that coming. But ultimately, yeah, I think he looked like a great option. So the captaincy as well, vice captain on Salah at the moment, captaincy armband on Haaland. I think really this is a 50-50 coin flip. I could have gone Salah as well. It's both home fixtures for them. I think Palace defensively, I would say, because they're a bit more, let's say, privy to the Premier League, they've got a bit more knowledge of how Liverpool play. Maybe they set up and make it a little bit more difficult for him to find an attack in return. On the flip side of that, although the Bournemouth fixture versus Villa was a little bit surprising and ended up in a 2-0 win for Bournemouth without any goals conceded, I anticipate that when they go to the Etihad, Man City are a completely different outfit and team altogether in comparison to Villa. So I think that Scott Parker's team are probably going to struggle to keep away this man here. He almost scored a hat-trick already against West Ham, which is not an easy thing to do. So I anticipate that he's going to be getting us even more returns next week. One last thing to mention really in terms of my thinking is that Andreas on that first bench slot, he's still there at the moment, but essentially he could come into the starting 11 before the deadline. I think he offers fantastic value. I mentioned that again in the previous breakdown video. I think at 4.5 million, he pretty much plays like a 5.5 to 6 million midfielder. He was linking up with Mitrovic really well. He's on every single set piece. Some of his deliveries were fantastic. There was a free kick, most notably, that I remember that was unfortunately, it did get a Fulham head on it, but it just couldn't be directed to goal. There was plenty of, like I say, link-up play, and essentially he's so far forward in the midfield line that I think we're going to see returns from him. So he's also in my thinking, and I think against Wolves, then with losing Connor Cody and playing a back 4, it looks a little bit shaky for them early doors. So I think they could potentially be a fixture to target, and with Andreas playing them this week, he definitely shouldn't be ignored. So that's the team, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you would make any transfers or any of the substitutes coming in for any of my starting 11. Who would you choose in terms of captaincy as well? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So moving into the second section of the video, where, as I said at the beginning, I've got 6 players that I feel should be essentially considered, not necessarily ones that I would do immediately, but definitely something that we need to be thinking about from potentially next week onwards, or maybe longer term. So First up, I think it's without really kind of any introduction, Gabriel Martinelli. It's, for obvious reasons, he's already had a price rise to 6.1 million, but I think a lot of the community so far within this channel and the Twitter and FPL community in general pretty much got it right with this guy. He offers tremendous value at that price point. He really did impress me in the Palace game. I think he was playing as that false number 9 and finding himself at the most far forward Arsenal player on the pitch numerous times. Gabriel Jesus was dropping slightly deeper and essentially Martinelli becoming the kind of lone striker at some points. He did miss one big chance as well, I think, in the as early as the 15-minute mark. So I anticipate that he will get chances. He will continue to impress. And like I say, at 6.1 million, if you haven't got an Arsenal attacker already other than Gabriel Jesus, he should be definitely considered. I've also put Cucurella in here, maybe controversially. We didn't obviously see anything significant from him in game week 1 as he didn't start the match. He came on for 15 minutes and managed to get himself a yellow card. So not the ideal start really that maybe he would have wanted. And from an FPL perspective, maybe it means nothing for us. But I would say that moving forward, he's got to be considered because of his price point. At 5 million, even if he plays left centre-back, I don't necessarily think he's going to stay playing in that position. I think that he will be given the licence to move forward and still create assists and big chances. And like I say, at 5 million, I think potentially he might not offer a direct replacement or coverage for Reece James, but from a Chelsea defensive point of view, I think at that value, if you can't quite stretch to Reece James like myself at the moment, he is one to consider. I've also moved on to James Maddison now as well in that 8 million bracket. I think although he only registered an assist, I think really he should be considered. If we haven't already thought about him, I just think that the fixtures don't necessarily dictate the reasons why we should go for him too early or now, but certainly moving forward, I think he seems to get better season upon season. Really, I think he knows that now, not being kind of in Europe as well this season with Leicester, these Premier League matches mean everything in terms of him potentially getting an England cap again. And with the World Cup, I do anticipate, again, another young English player that wants to prove a point, potentially showing up this season. So definitely one to watch. Aaronson's on here as well. Just before we move on to Aaronson as well, sorry, it's worth mentioning that Maddison also, I mean, I could have potentially overwritten that with Kulusevski. I think overall from the 8 million point, he definitely should be considered. A 13-point haul in his first week. The only problem I have with him at the moment is that it's that minutes risk. Now Richarlison is not suspended or coming back from suspension. Does he get the nod ahead of him? I would just like to see how Conte lines them up, and especially moving into the European games in the near future, I'd like to see more before I potentially jump on Kulu. But he's definitely an attacking option for Spurs. So yeah, Aaronson at 5.5 million. I think he looks like an absolute no-brainer move from Neto to him. So be that if the prices don't move for both players, I think a direct swap for him is definitely on the cards. Again, I didn't watch the highlights or this game live, but from the content that I've watched or podcasts I've listened to so far, I think, to be honest, he seemed like he was the real deal. He seems like he's come in, he's got the creativity. He's not necessarily a replacement for Rafinha by any means or by any stretch of the imagination, but from, again, people's feedback on an eye test, it looks like he can be an FPL asset that we should consider. I think with Bamford coming back now and looking a little bit sharper, back from injury as well, of course, if he can provide some essentially, some threat for him. We all know how clinical Bamford was in the first season in the Premier League, so I think he should be considered at that price point. I've also put in Raheem Sterling here. Although, again, from a Game Week 1 perspective, only scoring 3 points. I think statistically, though, he was there in and amongst the box, looking, again, from an eye test perspective, like a real threat, potentially that should be maybe considered the attacking option for Chelsea should we want one in our team. I think the only downside to having Sterling on this list particularly is just his price point, right? So £10 million is a little bit difficult to get to. For most managers' squads now, I think most people have gone with either a combination of Bailey, Neto and even Martinelli in their midfield line, which means a lot more money is in defence, and bringing that out into the midfield means at least 2 transfers, possibly even 3. So I think maybe he's one to just consider on potentially a wild card later on if we need to restructure the value of our teams a little.
but he's definitely one to watch based on his performance against Everton. I think he was unlucky not to score. And then finally, but not last but not least, I have put Darwin Nunez in there as the final option. I think really the key takeaway for me, again, I mentioned this in the video previous in the breakdown. The breakdown observations, I think he really, when he came on to the pitch, he looked like the absolute real deal. We wasn't sure what he would be bringing to the Premier League, much like Erling Haaland, and I think both of them shone in their respective performances, albeit that, of course, Haaland scoring 2 goals, Darwin only scoring 1. He still registered an important FPL assist for some managers, and at 9 million I do think he looks like a great option. The most important thing I think is that he looked like the catalyst for Salah, and I think if both of them are able to unlock each other a little bit, there is definitely reason I think to have both of them in our squad should the attacking side of the fixtures look strong enough for Liverpool right now. And I would argue they do. They look very good. I think that the only problem that most managers will find themselves in is if you have started with the triple up of Liverpool with either Luis Diaz or Andy Robertson. Obviously, I'm in the Andy Robertson camp at the moment. It's very difficult to move a Plange up to a Darwin without really kind of essentially performing open heart surgery on my team, right? There's too many moves that I would have to make in order to get him into my thinking or into the team. And also with Gabriel Jesus looking as threatening as he did, I'm not willing to just try and find that extra million to move him onto Darwin just yet, as I think that we've got plenty more to come from Jesus' perspective. So again, guys, really appreciate the support so far on the channel. It's been absolutely fantastic. Pre-season was great, and I'm so glad to be involved in the FPL world again. It's hooked me just as much as it has over the past few years. So looking forward to sharing that journey with you. So if you are new around here, you're new to the channel, you're just checking me out for the first time, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. All the content I create on this channel is completely free. The subscription button doesn't cost anything. So just help me out if possible by hitting that button for me. And of course, if you enjoy the content I create as well, please consider liking the video. And as I mentioned in the previous part of the video, please let me know in the comments what your thoughts are for Game Week 2. Is there any surgery that your team needs? Have you already made that Kane to Haaland move early on, or did you get caught out by the price reduction and price rise? What else have you got to think about in terms of moves? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys, and I try to respond to pretty much all of them. So again, thank you very much for the support, and I will see you in the next video.